So I met some friends. We met some friends at Birch's, and it looked like their silhouette sitting at the bar with the light coming in from the back. So we're like, yeah, like that. And they're going. And then we walk up there, we can finally see him, but it's not our friends. So yeah, you always have the light to your face. I go, oh shit, you got the same silhouette as my buddy, and the guy's laughing, and he's laughing. I go,
Uh-huh.
you know,
I get that. He's like, I
here
get
it
that all
is.
the time from you weirdos.
You're right. No, you know what? It's
But
funny
there,
because we talk a lot about like the bigger view, right? As far as like building your freedom and how do you set your machine up to create. But what we don't talk a lot about is kind of the day to day stuff, like right when I'm in front of a customer, like that interaction, right? And I think, communication, obviously, the better communicator you are, the easier it will be to create these relationships and build your business. And, so there's a few things that you learn in sales along the way. And and I know that I've had some interaction being on the other side of the sales process, someone trying to sell me stuff. And I remember thinking to myself how, a lot of shortcuts are taken today. People aren't doing the things that either they haven't been trained to do. They're not being a professional salesperson. And I think that in sales, because look at every business out there, sales is the most important aspect. You can have the best product in the world, the best service in the world, but if you don't have a sales channel to bring in new clients and sell things, nothing else matters. So, my thoughts are get that sales piece down solid to begin with. And, one of the biggest things, and I know we talked a little bit about tie downs in here, and I think a lot of people have heard the, ABCs of sales. What does that mean? What's that an acronym for? And it's always be closing, right? You always want to be closing, and that's tying down. And, how I look at that, if you're looking at it kind of on a linear view, is I think in any sales process, there's probably about 3 to 5 key topics or key issues that need to be agreed upon before we can finalize the sale together. And what a common mistake that people make is they get in this like presentation mode where they're just telling, selling is not telling, right? They're just telling the client all these things and they're covering these key issues, but they're not seeking agreement. Because if you look at it and you go, okay, let's say there's 3 key issues that I need to address in the sales process. If I hit the first key issue and I don't get an agreement, a solid yes, I agree, that makes sense on that first key issue, I can't move on to the second one because I'll never close the sale. It'll never get there. So every key issue you have to seek agreement on before you move on to the next one. And then the sale will really close itself and you can have a really soft sale like, oh, okay, so how did you want to, do you want to just put that on your credit card? Whatever your process is, right? You go, okay, do you want to just put it on credit card? Do you want to just, how do you paying for that? Or let me grab some additional information to get the paperwork done. And that becomes very natural and easy because I got agreement on every key issue along the way, right? If you don't, you must backtrack or you got to hang out here and find out why we don't have an agreement on this key issue. So it's really important, always seek agreement on key issues. Otherwise, the sale will never close. It just won't get there.
so so how do you do that? You talk about it needs to be done, but let's say we're in the nitty gritty part of the process, and and let me back up a little bit, and I would say this is
Right.
one of the points you made. This is not just about selling stuff. This is about communicating and
Right.
getting. It's like
Right.
how do I progress forward in life, whether you're selling
Mm-hmm.
something or just in regular life, right? Because you made the point that I don't know if we've lost some of this. Well, certainly we have. You see, I see it in
Right.
I have nephews, love them dearly, and and I'll get a text
Right.
from them, and 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 it's long, it's broad, it covers 1,000 different things, and they expect me then to respond with the text that gives them the answer. I don't know if they want a long one, a short one. They've got
Right.
so many things going on, but but they put it in writing all the time, and it's like, well, that's a terrible. If you want to move forward, if you want to get where you want to go, put it, texting it, emailing it, sending a telegraph. All those are really
Right.
terribly ineffective,
Mm-hmm.
terribly ineffective. So because there's no dialogue. And so when there's a proper
Right.
dialogue, and when you look at, well, what's a proper dialogue? And the proper dialogue is asking a question, letting somebody answer, continuing. So when we're
Right.
bringing it into throwing it into lights in a selling situation, like you said, well, so it has
Mm-hmm.
to follow how effective communication goes, but we put it in a sales situation, and then we add some specifics to it, right? Like you said,
Right.
but it follows how you need to communicate to move forward. And so let's
Mm-hmm.
bring up that situation where you said, well, you need to have agreement. I think you have to have agreement on a key issue before you can move forward. Agreed. So let's
Right.
do a quick one like this so people know specifically
Sure.
uh, what that looks like.
Well,
So what would be
okay.
it? And,
Well,
and and it doesn't have to be a specific thing that we're talking about selling,
no, but
but
it's
what's a tie? You brought up tie downs. What's an example of a tie down that you're asking a question to seek agreement
absolutely.
so they can answer, go forward.
Well, okay, because you obviously want to get an affirmative, right? Every time on this key issue, you want to get them to verbally, and I always wait for a verbal response. I don't just assume that they're agreeing because being quiet or just sitting there is not agreement. Okay, agreement is an answer, like a verbal response with someone, and so like, and we'll just give kind of a mock scenario here, and you go, okay, I could now. Do you see that would be better for you and your business, right, to go this route? And if they go, well, yeah, but okay, see, that's not an affirmative, right? Now, here comes, let's say, an objection, right? So the proper way to handle an objection is you have to paraphrase it first, because what I want them to understand is that I understand what they're saying, right? Okay, so you paraphrase it, and I know it can sound a little redundant sometimes, but what it does, the psychology on the other end is what's most important. It's not the psychology on your end, it's the
Hmm.
psychology on their end.
Right,
And you're
right.
always selling. You know, you're always either selling your business products, services, or you're selling ideas, right? In our general communication with your kids, with your spouse, with whomever, you're selling concepts, ideas with people. So to do that, if someone's not agreeing, well, do you see how this would be a much better fit for your business, wouldn't it? Yeah, but I'm just really concerned about, like cost of equipment. Oh, okay. So really the only thing you see as a hurdle for you right now is equipment. So if we could figure out something that would work better equipment wise, that's something you could move forward with.
So
Okay.
you're doing a
I've laid
workaround.
out what
You're
they're
doing a
con-
workaround with the question.
I'm doing a workaround. Right. So, but I'm paraphrasing. So, okay, equipment's your concern cost wise. And what I do when I talk with people, especially when you're selling face, and I probably do it on the phone, but I don't notice it. But when I'm talking with people, I'm nodding like this. When I want affirmative answers and I'm talking to them, I go, oh, okay. So if we could figure out something for equipment that would make it a little easier for you, then it would be something you want to move forward with. You notice how my head's nodding the whole time? Because what's
Yeah, but
happening is someone's
not in
watching
a
me.
fake. Like people know, like that does
No,
make sense, doesn't it,
yeah,
Chuck?
right,
You really would want to. It's not. You're not a bobblehead. It's subtle, right?
right, yeah.
All the stuff is subtle. Yeah. Well, and
It's
like you
subtle,
said
right?
earlier, if you really just if you want to get where you want to go in a conversation, if it's selling or, I mean, or selling, let's just say selling conversation. Like
Right.
you said it once a long time ago, selling is communicating with a purpose. So if you're communicating
Mm-hmm.
with a purpose to get you both to a certain place, well, then get good at this. Get good. If you want to
Right.
get where you want to go,
Right.
get good at this type of conversation. We call it leading.
Yes.
We call it leading.
Right.
It's a leading
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Let me ask you, let me ask you, does it make sense to do this, or does it make sense to do that? Give them
Right.
maybe options, or whatever the situation is. Like this, where we're
Right.
talking specifically about closes. Like, well, in
Mm-hmm.
closes, if it's just asking a question where they give you a yes or no, or A or B, or yellow or blue, or
Right.
whatever the question is, so that got it. Now that
Right.
they've answered that, we can move forward. I can lead them to the next question. And that's all it is, oh, okay,
Right.
okay, that makes sense. Good, good. You can patch it together with, yeah, I think so too. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Hey, let me ask you. And then you're on to the next
Right.
thing. And,
Right.
and,
Right.
and
And you're nodding the
you,
whole time. You're getting excited. Like, yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and you as the leader of a leading conversation are controlling the
Mm-hmm.
conversation because you're the one asking questions.
Right.
They're the one answering,
100%.
right? They're answering,
Mm-hmm.
and you let them speak and do whatever they're doing, and then to the degree that you want to hear what they're saying, because they may get off on a tangent. You
Right.
go, got it, and then yeah, got it, and then you ask them another question to divert them, to lead them to where you want to go next, and it's
Right.
and some people might go, wow, that's a manipulating conversation. Yeah. It
Mm-hmm.
is. You're bending it to
Yeah.
get where you want to go.
But
You're not doing them a
right.
disservice, hopefully. This is one of those things, by the way. You can use this for good or evil, right? And like so many
Right.
tools that are really super effective. Do you want to use your communication skills for good or evil? You have the choice if you're good at communicating. If you're
Right.
not good at communicating,
Right.
you don't have the choice of using it for good or evil. You can't
Mm-hmm.
sell, you can't get a date,
Mm-hmm.
you can't, you're just nothing, you got nothing.
Right.
But but
It's
when
a
you get
lonely
good at this,
existence.
yeah, and then when you get when then talking, which is easy, by the way, like
Mm-hmm.
we'll throw the science light on for a moment.
Right.
Speaking, super easy. Writing, it really, like if you could measure like bandwidth, when you're writing or
Right.
reading, it's really sucks down bandwidth hardcore. But when you're talking, it
Right.
almost doesn't. It's like why you shouldn't text or read when you're driving. But you can talk. You can talk and it draw almost nothing. So there's a
Right.
test. Like next time you're driving, really do some hardcore texting or reading and see how chances are
Next
really
time you're
go up that you get in
driving,
a
yeah,
car
that's a
accident.
great idea. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I
We're
think that's a great.
recommending that.
Well, I
We're
mean,
not. We're not really.
but look, people have been speaking to each other a lot longer than they've been writing to each other. Okay, so it's just how communication is gone over time, right? Verbal communication has been around since the dawn of time. So wouldn't it? And plus, you don't when you're writing to someone, you don't know their comprehension level. You have no idea, right? You don't, and things can appear to be like one dimensional. Things can be misconstrued. But if I'm having a
Yeah,
conversation with you, that's why it's leading and tying down, because what happens is you're leaving no light in between anything, any concepts. There's no room for misinterpretation. it's
yeah,
it's super super clear. There is no interpretation. It's clear, like we understand each other, right?
yeah.
Now that would be better for you. Should we just move forward with this? In I've
And that
never
took no
ever
time,
in my
right?
life
But
closed a sale with
in
writing.
in writing, that takes forever.
Yeah, yeah. What might take 3 days to respond back and forth to each other, we can wrap up in about a 5 to 8 minute conversation.
Right,
So
exactly.
you know,
No wonder you can't get where you want to
you
go,
know,
like when you're writing, because you can't ever get there. You just can't get there. You cannot. It takes
right?
too many, and then there's too many things that come up.
Yeah, but a lot of that too with people is called reluctance, right? Like people are afraid to have conversations with people. It's like you can't hide behind writing. You must learn how to communicate with people and be comfortable communicating verbally and not hiding behind a
Well,
text and not hiding behind an email.
well, yeah, there's a direct correlation between the effectiveness of your communication and the amount of money you earn. The so
Yeah,
direct correlation means the better you are at this, the more of this you get. So the better you are at communicating, the more money you make.
sure.
So 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 whether if you want to just put it in money, if you want to just here's a reason not to text or or email, because
Right.
it's you'll make crappy money and you'll never understand why, because oh,
Mm-hmm.
how you work, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. But if you can figure out this dialogue, this way to talk,
Right.
the best communicators rule the world. I mean, if you want to rule the world, then you figure out how to communicate effectively. If you want to make a
Better
lot of
be a good
money, then
communicator.
communicate effectively. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to get a lot of dates, figure out how to communicate effectively. All these things. If you want that, then
Right.
it's comes down to most of these things, effective communication, right? So if you want to sell a lot, if you want to have an effective business, you want to, be able to, be comfortable in situations in a checkout
Right.
lane at a grocery store, then
Mhm.
communicate, just work on that, work on these little things.
And the interesting about communicating, I recently I was down in Florida vacationing, and we were at the pool area sitting in the hot tub, and we're talking to this guy, and he had a trucking business, and he sold his business for $60 million, and and he was kind of talking about his journey, and what was really interesting is grammar wasn't 100% his best, right? I mean, you could tell he wasn't really super polished, but and he didn't use big words. He didn't use things to sound like he was the man. He was very simple in his communication, but it was really, really clear, and you knew precisely what he meant. And I thought, yeah, good for you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can. It adds up. It adds up what you were saying, because we were talking about some relatively deep concepts. You know how it goes sometimes when you're, about 9 to 10 beers in, and but I thought, man, even though you're not using, the $10 words, man. You're using very simple communication, but you are very succinct and to the point. And it was interesting to see that, right? Because I think a lot of people have this misconception that, in one, you don't know who's got money, right? And you never misjudge a book by the cover, right? That old saying that goes on. But when someone starts communicating with you, you go, okay, there's some depth here. There's more to this person than I realized. That's why you never judge and speak simple. Speak to the level of the person that you're dealing with. Don't go in there trying to flex your muscles that you have all these $10 words in your arsenal, because you're going to come off like an asshole. And don't do that. And there's no need to do that, because the winner is the one that gets his ideas communicated across, in the ones that and they decide to do business with you. That's how you win. It's not because you run around talking like you have all these, look at me, I'm so smart. Who cares? No one cares. But be a good communicator,
Well, you help
and
them
get people to subscribe to your
yeah, you
ideology.
made them comfortable, right? Right. The conversation was
Right.
comfortable, and you understood what they were saying, and that makes you know, makes you feel good that you understand what they're saying. Otherwise, you get snagged up, and you
Right.
feel if you feel stupid, the chances of you doing business with the person that sounds smart, they think, oh, I'm going to sound smart, so they're going to be impressed. Bullshit. It's just
Right.
exactly the opposite. They
Exactly.
absolutely are
It's
turned off by that. They do not like it. They're
100%.
uncomfortable. They feel inferior. They think that are maybe using big words to confuse them, or
Right.
they might be suspicious that you're using all these big words, and that happens a lot
Yup.
too. You don't know what you're talking about,
It
therefore you
does.
try to, muddy the water with big words
Right.
that I would never understand, and so
Right.
I can't make a good choice if I don't understand the conversation, right? If I don't understand what you're talking
Hmm.
about, so I'm going to go off to think about it. Well, are you going to get that? You're going to get that from me, or I'm going to go,
Right.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Just, I grew up in Iowa. You got to talk slower to me,
Yeah.
man.
Right. Slow down when
So
you talk to me.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Talk slower so I can understand what you're talking about, so I can buy from you. But if you use these,
Right.
I finally it occurred to me a handful of years ago just to finally, throw that light on people. Go, just stop for a second, man. Just stop.
Hmm.
What are we trying to do here? Either you're trying to get me to do this thing or not, because I don't understand what you're talking about when you use words like that. So I can't go forward. So we may as well either make this simple so I can understand it, or just stop now. I'll just go do something
Right.
else, and you go do something else too. And if people don't, if
Right.
some people don't get quite to that level of life. Let me just say, I just get impatient. I've just had too many of those conversations that I just don't want to have any more of those in my life. So I'll stop
Yeah.
those and just go, hey, hold on, hold on, hold on. And then, but
Hmm.
most people in conversation won't do that. They'll just go, and they'll just drift off, and they'll just quit. they'll just quit listening and
They
tell
do.
you I have to think about it, or you won't get what you want out of the conversation with that person, and you won't know why,
Well, then look at
but
your
it's because
right.
yeah,
But look at your quality of life then when you're not having the successes that you so desire because you're taking shortcuts or you're doing these things that we talk about that you shouldn't be doing. Because, I have a brother in law that he always goes, man, he's the same age as I am. And he goes, man, I got 25 good summers left. And when he
oh,
said that to me the other day, I kind of went,
no, that's not
I
true.
went,
You really
I,
don't. You've got about three, and then the rest of them start fading away.
right,
But anyway, go ahead.
right. It's right. I go, yeah, you're lucky. But when you throw it in that perspective, 25 of anything doesn't seem like a lot, right? So
No,
you're going, okay, hold on a minute. How do you want your life to roll out for you? What do you want your stress
right,
levels to look like? What do you want as you're building your freedom? It can be either really, really difficult, or you can, nothing's 100%, right? Except death and taxes, right? Okay. But you can certainly make your life a lot easier. That journey can be a lot easier if you use a few different communication techniques. And because then you start getting validation. You start going, wow, holy cow, this
that
stuff is
worked.
actually working. Yeah, it's working. It's pulling off, and then it gives you more energy because communicating a bad way and running through all those struggles for me anyway, because I've taken shortcuts and I botch stuff. I still do today. And I go, dude, I know better than that. Why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
whatever the reasons are, that's exhausting.
yep,
That's
yep,
exhausting. Don't do that to
yeah.
yourself.
Well, it's a waste of
You know?
time, right? And it's frustrating unless you look at that and go, all right, hold on. Like you reflect and go,
Right.
okay, what did I learn? And okay, when that comes up again,
Right.
all right, how could I have done that differently? And next time, how quickly can
Right.
I snap out of it? The typical
Mhm.
way that I've been doing it, and it's not working as well as I'd like. How can I snap out of that and go, okay, I need to maybe test some of the things that we're just talking about today, or how, what's something that I could test, something that fits how I would be comfortable communicating. How might I do that? And then and then
Right.
uh, and reflect on how that worked. Like you were just saying, you get
Right.
validation, and hopefully if it worked or doesn't work, whatever you're reflecting on, you're gonna get. If it worked, then you get validation that it worked, right? Or you get validation that it
Right.
didn't work because you didn't figure it'd work in the first place.
Right.
I think even speaking with, let's say you've got a room full of a thousand um, PhD people with doctorates, right? And they use the
PhDs.
the five
Right.
dollar words, amongst one another just to prove that they're smart. But I would,
Right.
they also like stupid comedy. They
Sure.
I bet, like a keynote speaker, they would love they would love and find it probably refreshing just to hear somebody talk in simple language, like the kind of stuff that they grew up,
Hmm.
ma and pa did. They understand
Hmm.
what, you know,
Yep. Right.
it doesn't have to, you don't, even speaking to a group of 1,000 of those, I still think that I would, and granted, you want to speak to them in a way that is, that they understand. But, but you don't have to speak super scientifically to a group of, people with PhDs.
Hmm.
They're human. There's a real human element in humans. And, and
Hmm.
it just speak in a way that, it's almost like, let me say this in a way that it's like you speak from the heart rather than, it's easy to get
Yep.
mixed up with things when you're speaking from too much,
Uh-huh.
too cerebrally. When you're speaking from here, it's
Hmm.
it gets drawn out. It gets confusing. It takes too long to say what the hell you're trying to say. When you just go, look, let me speak with you in a simple, heartfelt sort of way, and that doesn't,
Right.
simple and heartfelt can be. They're like the guy that you talked about that sold a trucking company for $60 million. He probably
Yeah.
wasn't a cunning linguist, right? He wasn't,
No,
a
he was
verbal,
not.
fire dancer. It wasn't. That's not who he was. You do not have to be
Right.
in any situation. I imagine too, a crowd of 1,000 financiers, right? And you can speak to them in a
Right.
common language. You can speak to, it doesn't matter, a group of orthopedic
Right.
surgeons, it doesn't matter. Speak to them in a way that
Mhm.
is simply understood, and they will get your message, and they will appreciate it, and they'll give you 5 stars, and they'll love you and shake your hand at the end of it, and
Yep.
and write reviews like, oh my God, is so so wonderful, so refreshing, what a wonderful,
Hmm.
but they won't
Hmm.
identify that you weren't eloquent to a you didn't speak like you're reciting out of a scientific journal. You just don't have to do that.
Right.
You don't have to do that.
Right.
If you're speaking about something, the only time I think that you need to be very specific in your language is if you're talking about a technical issue and there are certain definitions of this
Mhm.
technical thing that you're talking about. Well, I took the,
Right.
cerebral hematoma. Ah, got it. So it's a blood clot in the brain, right?
Got it.
Or,
Yep.
and you wouldn't
Hmm.
do that, but because if you're speaking with doctors about a specific thing, or if you're talking mechanics, oh, I took
Hmm.
where the O-ring seats against the such and such valve, right there, you get the, such and such varnish after, and so you're going to speak to them in language. They go, yeah, 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 I've seen that. That
I
is
get
the
it.
only
I get
time
it.
I think it makes any sense. When you're talking to an electrician about number of volts or ohms or whatever the hell
Right.
they measure things in, they go,
Right.
got it. So you didn't have enough voltage going through the regulator to then you talk very
Right.
specific, very specific language. Otherwise, you don't.
But you would to someone who understands that. Like, it's like people that use acronyms, right? Like, it's like, man,
God,
I'm
I
not
fucking
in
hate
this
acronyms.
industry. I don't know what that
Strike
means.
the effing word out of that. But
Yeah.
and it's a
You
world
can
gone
bleep that
mad with
out.
acronyms. I don't know what any of them
Oh, I
mean.
know.
And and now it's
Right.
one of the worst ways that you can communicate. The world is really screwed
Hmm.
up right now, and you can see it by how they use acronyms. Nobody knows what
Right.
they mean, yet you use them, and unless
Right.
back to that, unless you're a doctor or a mechanic or something, they use that term, or you're a bunch of accountants and you use EBITDA, you know, okay, they know what that
Right.
means. The rest of the
Right.
world doesn't have a freaking clue what
Right.
EBITDA means, and they don't use it. So when you
That's
use it,
exactly right.
now I'm stuck on what is EBITDA. I'm wondering what is it, in trying to remember what that means from a prior
What it stands
conversation where it
for.
came up a year
Yeah.
ago. I go, I don't know, but then I've missed everything else that they said as I'm gyrating on trying to, we work with in the
Hmm.
credit card processing business, work with the biggest platform in the world. It's everywhere, and they used to use
Right.
they use acronym, and they keep changing the acronyms for the same meaning. They keep changing the
Right.
acronyms, and now they've added like 150 new
Right.
acronyms, and they keep changing them. It's like, wait a second, that's not fair. Don't use acronyms. Do not use acronyms. God help you. Back
Hmm.
in communication, right? You know, use acronym only amongst people who know specifically your
Right.
interpretation of that acronym, what it means to you and what it means to them has already been discussed in a prior situation where you've got the exact same definition, and if you use it off the
Hmm.
cuff, if it's something that is
Everybody gets it.
already very well
Yeah.
known. Unless that's the case, do not use an acronym, because
Hmm.
you'll shoot yourself in the foot every time. Imagine every time you use an acronym in the wrong situation, you blow off a toe. You know, you know,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
you'd see a lot of
Then
people
you just
hobbling
got two
around out here,
stubs.
right? They've
Right.
got no toes. Like, you ever seen a man try to walk with no toes, Chuck?
Yeah. And it's not easy.
No, they
It's not
stumble
easy.
around. They don't
There's a
get where
lot
they
of
want to
falling
go.
forward.
It's bad, man. It's bad.
There's a lot of falling forward. Well, and the thing about
Yeah,
it's like, look, you you must, when you're selling, you're getting your right. It's really hard for me, but you must throw your ego out the window. Okay,
yeah,
let the ego go. No one cares. This is the thing. No, and even if and you will oftentimes deal with other people that are really they're really shading you with the ego, right? You must keep your cool. Just keep your cool and use the techniques, because when you use the techniques, you dismantle that, and then you get them to subscribe to your way, whatever it is, the sale, the idea, the whatever. You just you want to be, what do we always say, charmingly aggressive, right? You want to be charming. You don't want to be, ego doesn't matter, because you know what, at the end of the day, if you get them to do business or subscribe to your idea, you win. You win. And I know life isn't all about winning or losing, but if I'm helping them get them something that's better for them, that's a victory I'd gladly have.
Well, it makes
So
it
that's
better,
the idea behind
you know,
it. Yeah,
winning. Yeah. And if you're winning, if winning means it's good for you and it's good for them, well, do your best, to
right,
help, to help
right.
yourself win, to help them win, help them understand so
Oh,
that
that's
they can
funny.
win. And even if you don't put it in the measure it as winning, it's just like, all right, how enjoyable. I don't know if you want to, if you'd call it
Right,
that, but you'd said earlier about your brother-in-law. So, oh, I've got 25 summers left. Okay, 25 good summers
right,
left. We'll start. Well, how about if we start now? Enjoying
right.
every day in an effective way that's comfortable. And not like
Exactly.
laying back and settling in, but like a
No,
comfortable chance. Like, there's some, we're talking about communication. So you can use, it's like, how effective can you be? And it's not like short, but it's like, how effective can you be?
hmm,
And often it is short, but how effective can you be? And that'd be something like if you were to be working on something, unlocking, like, all right, today I want to be the one thing that I want to do. What's one small way? How can I keep in mind today? How can I be just a little more
right.
effective today with everybody that I talk with? How can I speak a little bit more than write, or text or email? Or even if I do that, what if the email or text said, hey, what if if we had a little conversation, could we figure this out really fast or something like that? Let's find a good time. Instead of typing it out, which is totally, how could you, if you could just remind
Right.
yourself today, or if you, as you get on track today or this week, maybe my project this week is what are the smallest things that make the biggest difference in communicating with
Right.
everybody? How could I test it with everybody? How could I have that on my mind? If I'm talking to Chuck, there's no hope. But no, you
Right.
know, how, how,
It
how
only took
could
you
how
35 years to learn that, so I don't know.
right, right. Like, oh shit. But with everybody, whether they're 9 months old or 3 years old or 50 years old or
Right.
male, female on the other side of the planet, how could I do this? What could I test? The smallest
Mhm.
things that might make the biggest difference. What would that be? And then to go, oh, I'm going to do it here.
Right.
Just that. This is all I'm working on, right? Because if we go back and we go, look, there's a direct correlation between how effectively you communicate and the money you make, or how, whether it's money you make or happiness you have or success or feeling good or
Mhm.
getting where you want to go with a relationship. Let's say that.
Right.
Let's say it's your spouse. You
Right.
go, man, how can I do this? Just smallest things, just the smallest things. And you will find,
Right.
let's see what you find. Let us know what you find.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yes. Put it to use. Try it.
Yeah.
And like anything else, you got to work on it. I mean, it takes work.
Yeah.
But I'll
Well,
tell you what, once you get
if here's how I think of it like this. If you,
right.
like when you get on track every day, I do this. I go, all right. So I have these cards that I have with me. Anticipate, like at the first thing, like I anticipate my day, right? I anticipate looking at my day. I go, all
Right.
right, what am I, I look for two things when I use this card, adapting. I go, all right, what am I adapting? What am I testing today? What am I, and so it would be unlocking better communication with the smallest things. And I look also into my day like, okay, I might have to, as I'm adapting, I might have to adapt. There might be all kinds of things I might have to. So I'm looking forward, going, all right, the things I run into that I'm seeing in my day, how might I need to adapt those situations to get where I want to go? And then and
Right.
then there's a play between what you're adapting and then I've used like reflect, right? You reflect and you ponder, go, well, how'd that
Mhm.
go? How did it go? And the
Right.
play, if you just play these cards throughout your day, like there's a synergy between them, right? Because you're 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 anticipating what's next all the time, so you don't get T-boned, right? You get to respond
Right.
rather than react, and so you go, okay,
Hmm.
if I know what I'm doing here, let's say if I'm testing, what are the smallest things that I can do to better communication? All right. So reflect how my change went, and then I go, okay, I can anticipate what's next because I'm bettering it, right? They call it adaptive intelligence, right?
Right.
I'm adapting as I go, and and lights are going off, and things are getting better. And I go, okay, then next time I'm talking to this person, I'm gonna do more of the same, or I'm gonna do it a little bit differently. It's and pretty soon things are working out much better for you than they were in the past. Instead of doing the same thing all the time and not knowing how to change it, because change is hard. Because I think people usually think, oh,
Right.
I've got to communicate in a totally different way, and I don't know how to get there. Well, this is how. This is a bridge from where you are now to where you want to go. It's just a tiny,
Right.
tiny little thing. Get on track every day. What am I testing? Where might I anticipate it's going to be used? And then I'm reflecting. How did it go? You know,
Hmm.
it's a pretty simple little system that you can carry with you. And but it's small things like, and you don't have to. I wouldn't be measuring. Okay, how better can I communicate? How can I? You have to be careful. How many? Maybe like one thing for sure. Maybe
Yeah.
two, three at the
Hmm.
God's most, because it's too much. Too much.
Right.
You got too many things you're doing. It's like, okay, I've got to work in communication, my
Right.
lack of twitching in my eye, my smile, all these things. If you go to 4 or 30 things you're trying to test, you're screwed. But if you did just
Yep.
today, tomorrow, just this week, it's the smallest thing. Just test it, and just these little changes in how you communicate. You ask questions.
Right.
You use language that's going to make sense to them. How, and then reflect on it. How's it going? And then you can let us know. Let us know. You can
Yeah.
come back and you can comment to this, whatever you call it, a post, whatever it is. You can comment and go, all right, here's
Hmm.
what I found with this, and then let us know. Let the world know.
Right.
Either there absolutely doesn't work, or real man,
Right.
those little things that make a big difference. It's like, and those little things that make a big difference. Usually, we look for big things. We go, man, I'm going to hit a home run. I'm going to change everything. Well, that doesn't work. But if you change little
No.
things, you can actually see how they work, and you go, oh, okay. So let us know, because you just may get what you want by looking at small
Hmm.
things, tiny little things, tiny little things. You can only nail one nail at a time, right? You can't nail
Right.
a
Yep.
thousand nails and have a house. You can't play all the notes and have a song,
Right.
like at once.
Right.
It's a thing. It's one note at a time. You can only do one thing at a time. And so tiny little things that make a big difference. And then you probably can create the kind of communication, the kind of, you know, wherever you're trying to get to.
Hmm.
But let us know.
Yeah.
Comment down below, like they say. Be sure to
Yeah.
leave a
Right.
comment.
Well, working on
Well,
those
but
tiny little
first test it.
things.
Don't, if it sounds good, you can say that too. If it sounds stupid, you can say that too. But test it and let us know what you
Right.
find. Not only
Yeah.
help
It's
yourself
the
out, help the
small
world
things that
out.
add
Oh, I
up to
tried
a
this, and,
really
and
big
this worked, or
thing.
this didn't. What's that?
It's all those little small things that add up to a really big thing. People think it
Yeah.
is. It's not a home run. Everything's not a home run. I mean, baseball's not played that way, right? That you only score if you get a home run. No. There's base hit. There's second, third. There's things that go on. Same in business. Same in life. It's just
Yeah.
always be moving forward. Always be moving
And of course they
forward.
focus on home runs, right? That's what shows up in the highlight reel.
Sure.
But there's a lot of, put
Sure.
it in the baseball framework. There's a lot of there's a million there's million things that went on besides that one little thing in the highlight reel that stood out. Yeah, you want that. That'd be
Hmm.
great. But it doesn't. It almost never happens like that. It always
Right.
happens in a different
Yeah.
way. It's just you see the highlight
Hmm.
reel where you see people's Facebook, right,
Right.
or Instagram, and it's all airbrushed. It's not the world they live anyway, right? It's the
No.
jet isn't theirs. They just posed. They've got a buddy that works at the
Right.
airport and said, yeah. You can sneak out there.
Yeah. Come on
Buy me
down.
a beer and I'll let you sneak out and take a picture by that private jet.
Right.
Or buy the Ferrari or all the other stupid stuff that people typically really don't have. But uh, but it's that, the little things. Just try it and you can feel it. Like when it works, you go, son of a gun, that worked.
Uh-huh.
That actually
Hmm.
worked. It's like sweet.
Hmm.
And now it's like, wow, there's that what do you call it, verification? What did we call it before? But you go,
Yeah.
you can feel it. that worked. And now, hey, I might be on something here. And so you keep using it and keep testing it and keep, and what's next? How can I do that in another situation with that same person or with that
Right.
same situation across a population of people? If I'm making we'll bring it back to sales. If I'm calling, I don't know, veterinarians.
Right.
All right, if that worked before, that little joke about the puppy with five legs. I'm going to test it
Right.
again over here with the place in Albuquerque, and then the next
Mm-hmm.
one, or I'm going to better my,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. Or you ask them the question in a little different way, or you ask them, you communicate just a little bit differently, and it worked. You go, all right, I'm going to try that.
Yep.
And now, we've just elevated, right? We've ascended. We're rising, and things are getting
Right.
better. And now we go, holy cow! Now other lights are going to come on. Other ideas are going to occur to us because we're
Right.
no longer polishing the old way, trying to make the old way. I'm going to use instead of
Mm-hmm.
$5 word, I'm going to use I'm going to use a $6 word. That's going to make it better. Or I'm going to, say it more, say the smart word much more eloquently. No, 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 no.
Right.
Let's not try, because that's what people think they should do. I'm going to practice my script and I'm going to make it,
Right.
I'm going to make it sound really smart. No, 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 just stop. Let's be simple and effective and ask better questions. And then when you see it working, you go, son of a gun, that actually worked. Yeah. And yeah, all this stuff, little things.
Simple and
What are
effective.
the yeah,
Simple and
smallest
effective.
things like,
That's
yeah,
the
what are the
key.
smallest things? Like a totally different spin on things. What's the smallest thing? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and if you look for
Right.
like, what's the smallest thing I can do to make the biggest difference? That's a question nobody asks you to do, or ask yourself. They're
Right.
always like, how can I do this in a big way? Well, it's just too far of a reach. There are too many things you've got to figure out and so you never know even where to start. I don't know where to
Well,
start with this stuff,
isn't
but if you,
what well, what's crazy about that, and I like how you framed that. You said, "What's the smallest thing I can do to make the biggest difference?" Isn't that kind of how life works? What's the smallest investment I can do to get the biggest return? It's the same concepts. It's what's the smallest thing I can do, because that's what everybody wants. Well, I want to invest $100 and come out with 10 million. Sure. Well, what's the smallest change I can make to have the biggest result? That is good investing, whether it be monetary, emotionally, whatever it is. It's because you only have so much emotional capital to use. So use it wisely. Use it wisely. Make the smallest change to make the biggest difference. I think that's really, really something that everyone should remember.
yeah. Well, imagine if that's what you like when you're getting on track. What if that's the question that you asked?
Right.
You go, all right, as I anticipate my day, what's the
Right.
smallest change I can make? What's the smallest thing I can
Mm-hmm.
do to make the biggest difference? What's the smallest change? What's the smallest thing that I can test that would get me the biggest
Right.
difference? The best quality of whatever, relationship, life, selling, or sales, whatever it might be, you know, painting, maybe I should just try a dab of white, a small dab of white. Okay, well,
Yeah.
try
There you
that.
go.
It's whatever you're doing, what's the smallest thing that I can change to make the biggest
Mm-hmm.
difference?